Today, let's have a heart to heart, because the best kind of heart is a beating heart. And the same way the best kind of heart is a beating heart, the best kind of eyes are seeing eyes. And it's interesting because the best kind of legs are capable legs, walking legs. And you may be thinking, Samuel, that's all true, but what's that got to do with the reason you're doing this video? And the reason it's got something to do with the reason we're doing this video is because of purpose. You see, you and I are alive because of a purpose. Whether we appreciate that purpose, whether we acknowledge that purpose, whether we're mindful of that purpose, purpose is at the heart and soul of every single human being alive. And what's interesting is purpose is best seen in the function in which we utilize to succeed. Okay, so by that, what I mean is birds fly because they were created to fly, which means that birds succeed every single day. And I hope you agree. And fish swim because they were created to swim, which ultimately means that fish succeed every single day. Now, one of the things I've often said in the past is that human beings, excuse me, as I grab this, human beings, if we take this entity as an example of a human being, human beings are the only thing in God's creation that have the potential to fail and not succeed. And there's a reason why. And this is what I wanted to touch on as we speak about or speak through this heart to heart. This is what I wanted to touch on as we consider and contemplate this idea that the best eyes are opened eyes, seeing eyes. The best heart is a beating heart, right? The best legs are capable legs. Because one of the things that I think is essential for us to talk about in your journey of creating harmony and sustainable wealth for you and your family, in your journey of leaving a legacy for your dearest and nearest loved ones, is to understand that purpose is at the center of that productivity. And if we do understand, if we're faithful in our understanding that birds were created to fly and they fly every single day, hashtag they succeed, and fish were created to swim and they do that every day, hashtag they succeed, but human beings are the only thing on this planet that have the potential capacity to fail. Well, let me not say potential capacity, because all of the things I mentioned previously have the potential capacity to fail, yet they don't. But human beings simply seem to fail at an exponentially higher rate than all of the other things I mentioned, the birds and the fish. A great question we should ask ourselves is why? And the answer is quite simple. It's because human beings, we have choice. We have choice. We have the ability to decide. We have the ability to say yes to what is right or yes to what is wrong. We have the ability to even deeply say yes to what is right and no to what is wrong, or adversely, as many people do, say yes to what is wrong and no to what is right, and all the gaps in between. Excuse me. And all the gaps in between. So when I say those gaps, just to make this super clear, that includes the yes to what is right and yes to what is wrong group, and the no to what is right and no to what is wrong group. Okay, so we have all of the combinations in between that are possible, and that is what allows human beings to fail. Now, we spoke recently in our video about outputs and outcomes, and one of the things that's interesting is if you take a keen focus on outputs and outcomes, you can use that to measure the error in our inputs, okay? And this is why when we speak about success, this is why when we speak about outcomes and outputs, which is the way in which we can define a form of success, we start to understand there's a connection. There's a connection between purpose and success. There's a connection with the fact that the bird was created to fly and it flies every day, thus we deem that as a success. the fish was created to swim and it does that every day, it swims, thus we deem that as success. So if you and I were created for a divine purpose, a specific purpose, a particular purpose, and we do that every day, guess what? Like we already know, it's going to be defined as success. So the challenge we have is the fact that many a times what we do each day doesn't amalgamate, doesn't accumulate, and doesn't end up being what we would deem as success for many human beings on the planet. I think where we are in the world right now is a perfect time to have this kind of dialogue and speak about these kind of things, because where we are in the world right now, we can see people, we can see leaders, we can see entities, governments, organizations making decisions that may not be extremely profitable for humanity, but yet they still make those decisions. And a great question would be why? Why, right? If the best kind of heart is a heart that's beating, if the best kind of eyes are eyes that are seeing, then why would people make decisions that are contrary to their best interests, or at least contrary to the best interests of humanity? And I'm going to be like totally transparent. I don't have the answer to that. I genuinely don't have the answer to that. Sometimes I do think to myself, maybe it's out of ignorance. Most of the time, I probably think to myself, knowing how I was when I was a child, even though I'm not vilifying these leaders by calling them children or childish, but I remember how ignorance had consumed me as a child. I remember how ignorance was an element of my poor decision making and choices. But more importantly than ignorance, I look back and see that pride was probably one of the biggest fuels catapulting me. Let me use that word, catapulting me away from good or great decision making, and definitely from God decision making. But that makes sense, because if you're like me and you read the Bible, it says that pride comes before a fall. That makes sense, because if we're readers of the Bible, we know in the Bible it says humility comes before honor. And that literally gives us the blueprint. The blueprint is treacherous destruction is a byproduct of pride, because pride has this weird way of deceiving us. Pride has a weird way of making us think things are a certain way, but they're actually nothing like that way. And this comes back to what I shared a moment ago, that the best kind of eyes are seeing eyes. Like the perfect best kind of heart is a beating heart. And what happens is, if you aren't seeing clearly, then you're not going to be making the decisions daily. You're not going to be making decisions in your best interest. You're definitely not going to be making decisions in the best interest of humanity or others, because of the fact that you're seeing erroneously. So as we think about the development of cash flow, as we think about the development of wealth, as we think about success in our lives, as we think about leaving legacies, as we think about being better leaders, as we think about harnessing our skills as investors, as entrepreneurs, as influencers, as people who are saying, look, I'm an educator, I've got a mandate to assist and equip and take other people to new places in their life. One of the key things we would receive value from is recognizing the root core purpose in our endeavors. What is the actual core purpose in the work we're doing? If there is no core purpose, then maybe it's time to take a step back and actually evaluate whether you should be doing what you're doing. Now, the reason this is a helpful conversation is, when I was working a job, if I would have had this conversation clearly, it would have helped me realize that yes, I'm having and adding social capital to the community, quote unquote, by being a teacher, by being a teacher trainer, by teaching secondary and A-level maths, by teaching teachers how to teach. I'm adding value to a community. Yes, I am. However, what's the purpose? What's the implicit purpose in this? And is the ultimate accumulation of my day-to-day activity in that world, in that historic world that I lived in, basically something of purpose? Did I used to live in that world, working as a teacher, working as a teacher trainer, teaching secondary and A-level maths, as someone who knew that when you pile it all up together, the day-to-day interactions, the day-to-day workings, the day-to-day diligence, that it would ultimately be an output, an outcome of purpose, an outcome of success. And the reality is, if I had that conversation with somebody, with me, even with myself, right? I would like to think that this would have been extremely helpful. I would have liked to think that this would have maybe even opened my eyes to help me realize that something had to change, because I was actually working towards my own demise. My own demise, because everything I was doing was just a byproduct of the script that we've all been sold. In the US, they call it the American dream. In the UK, we don't call it the UK dream, but you know what I mean. It's the same thing. It's that go to school, get good grades, so you can buy a house and get married and get a good job. And it's the same script. It's the same script again and again and again. And in a few of the programs I've watched recently, mainly online, more so than television, I've heard this term come up, this term that I thought was a forgotten term before, the term of the matrix, and how many people are living in a form of a matrix, a system of control. And the reality is, whether you are or are not living in some form of a matrix, in some system of control, for most of us, we aren't. For you and I, we probably aren't. We're probably way more fortunate than that form of control, yet still potentially deciding to stay under a form of control. Now, this is not my attempt to encourage you to move in an anarchy kind of fashion. This is not that. This is my attempt to speak about the way we can easily measure success by observing outcomes and outputs, the way we can track those successes and recognize that they're actually a real byproduct of purpose. And we can then track that even to nature and see that by virtue of the fact that a fish swims and it was created to swim, it's ultimately accumulating its own levels of success. And ultimately, the fact that a bird flies and it was created to fly means it's ultimately racking up its points or miles, let's put it that way, in its world of achieving success. So then the question then becomes, what about us? What about you and I? How are we racking up our miles? How are we racking up our points in our world of success? For some of us, it's going to be just get the money. For some of us, it's going to be just take care of my children. But the reality is, what if your purpose is actually a bit deeper than that? What if your purpose is actually a bit more than that? What if your purpose is actually more fulfilling than that? What if we could stick ourselves into the lane so uniquely that all the other things we're focused on will be direct byproducts, and all the other people that we're loving on will be direct beneficiaries? And you might be thinking, Samuel, how's that possible? Well, I read the Bible, and in Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, it says, if you seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, which typically simply means the right way of doing things, his right way of doing things. Righteousness, right standing, the right way to get it done. If you seek that first and his righteousness, then all those other things which the Gentiles seek will be added unto you. You see, it's interesting to realize that there are some paths for us that once we decide on them and we commit to them, the byproduct of them is all the other things we've been working on. It's interesting to think about the fact that by a fish just swimming, it's going to accumulate its rank of success. By a bird just flying, it's going to accumulate its rank of success. And by a heart just beating, it's going to accumulate its rank of success. Because interestingly enough, when the heart just beats the way it's created to beat, guess what happens? Everyone else succeeds, even the blood that goes to the feet. That's the reality. The reality is when we are actually in unison, when we are actually operating in the symphony of life that we were created to operate in, things start to fit into fashion, things start to form its flow, and we start to realize this is what we should have been doing from the beginning. And the challenge we have is sometimes we have to stop in our tracks of what we've been doing in order to get onto the lane of what we should be doing. I've had so many experiences like that in my life. Obviously, I just shared with you about having been a teacher and a teacher trainer and saying to myself, this is the path. But if I had this kind of conversation, maybe I would have shifted earlier. And I don't know what it is for you. I don't know if it's your career path. I don't know if it's your relational path. I don't know if it's your wealth approach. I don't know if it's your parenting approach, but for all of us, there's often, as human beings, people with choice, people with the ability to decide, there's often so many different things where we can look at and say, you know what, the reason I'm not getting the outcomes I desire in this lane is exactly because of what Samuel's talking about. It's because I'm not focused on my purpose here. Or I haven't given this up to focus on my purpose in another area. And the reason why this is so profound, the reason why this is so powerful, and the reason why for me it's so pertinent to have this conversation is because it's all fair and well me sharing tactics, tips, and tools on how you can move further faster in your finances. But if actually on the inside, you're doing unfulfilling work, if actually on the inside, you're not even serving yourself, let alone really righteously being able to serve anyone else, then I would be doing you an injustice. I'd be doing you a disservice. So that's why I said today, we need to talk about the heart, because the best kind of heart is a beating heart. That's why today I said we need to talk about the eyes, because the best kind of eyes are seeing eyes. And I get it. There are eyes that do not see. But one thing I can tell you is even those eyes that do not see, the people who have them are still working to see. So wouldn't it make sense if you have eyes that can see to allow them and use them to see? If you have a heart that can beat, that you allow it and use it to beat? And I want us to understand that that's the same about our lives. If you're called with a purpose to become or to do something, to have something, to be something, and you fall short of that thing for whatever reason, for fear of ostracization. I don't even know how to say that word right now. Let's go. All right. And you guys, you could probably tell today is kind of like a tired, slumpy day, right? But we're going. We're going to add the value. So ostracization, I'm butchering it. So let me move on. But that's the reality, right? If you are afraid, if you are intimidated, if you are feeling anxiety and anxious about being who you see yourself as inside, and if you feel that you may be ostracized, and that's what's making you say, you know what, maybe it's not for me to be who I desire to be. Maybe it's not for me to learn a new language in my 40s. Maybe it's not for me to travel and move to a new country as an adult who's already married with children, right? Maybe it's not for me to start to decipher and get more into my discovery of tech, because I've always wanted to get closer to tech, but you know what? I just don't know. I've always been anti-tech all my life. Whatever the story is that you're hearing within yourself, take a step back and ask yourself the more pertinent story. Is me not doing this thing, me deciding not to walk in my purpose? Is me not doing this thing, me deciding not to succeed every single day? Because the birds, they fly every single day and we deem that as success. And the fish, they swim every single day and we look at them and deem them as a success. And my deepest desire for you and I is for us to make decisions every single day so that we, our children, and our legacy can deem us as a success. This is Samuel Akinwin. I'm signing out. First and foremost, let me appreciate you and thank you for bearing with me throughout today's video. I feel fairly zapped, but I'm still here. And I want to encourage you to remember that it's small keys that open up big doors. And I'll see you on tomorrow's video. Good day. God bless. Let's go.